Alright, here we go. First thing we'll ask Gilvis about is the Lost Prophecies, that is after all why we're here. And Gilvis has studied Lost Prophecies quite extensively. I'm sure he knows them backwards and forwards by now. And he has taken a few excerpts from them, and has written them down for us and added some annotations, and when we ask him about them, he adds them to our inventory so we can look at them on our own. Next up, we'll ask him about Dagoth-Ur, the big bad plot villain so far. Up to this point, the Ordinators and the Buoyant Arbiters have been able to keep Dagoth-Ur inside of the Ghost Fence. Yes, I am aware of the fact I've been calling it by the wrong name all this time. But the problem is, Dagoth-Ur has been growing stronger with corpus disease and blight and all of that, and he is going to eventually try and take over the world through it. And some priests are getting somewhat concerned that the Tribunal is losing its battle against Dagoth-Ur. And now I think I'll just go straight down the list of all of the topics he has to talk about. First up's the Apocrypha, and that is specifically the texts that the distant priests study. And they are the hidden writings, as he calls them, of the temple, and these are the writings that the temple tries to suppress, and the writings that he has given us a select excerpt of. And the whole point of the distant priests is that they are sort of rebels in that they study this Apocrypha. Next up is the background of the distant priests. And as I mentioned before in the previous text, they are more accepting of the Apocrypha and all the differences it has with temple doctrine. And while most people prefer to side with the temple, the distant priests say perhaps there's a better way. Next topic is the war hero from a long time ago we are reincarnated as. And he doesn't really tell us much about it, he just gives us a whole bunch of books for us to take a look at later once we're done with him. The next topic is who we are reincarnated is who we are now. And he tells us nothing we don't already know. They start believing in the Nerevarine because Dagoth-Ur is growing stronger. And so the distant priests have turned to this messianic prophecy in order to, because it sort of gives them this hope that they can possibly save Morrowind. Regarding the 6th house, it tells us that they are indeed growing stronger, and because they're growing stronger, a lot of people are turning to their ancient faiths, which is how this messianic prophecy started picking up steam in the first place. And he also mentions Lord Azura, one of the Daedric goddesses, and the part she plays in this, which we'll get into even more detail in a few quests from now. These last 2 topics, the Lost Prophecy and the 7 Curses, are just him saying those particular things, and I'm going to read them to you once we're done with all these topics. So that means that we are pretty much done with everything he has to say, and now we can continue on to the actual texts, if I can find out where they are. Yeah, I think I'll start with this one, Saint Nerevar. So a long time ago, all of the great houses formed what was called the First Council, which consisted of all 6 great houses, Lord Nerevar himself, Vivek, the main god of Vardenfell, Amlexi, and Silthasil, who are 2 other gods of Morrowind we will meet in one of the expansions. And all of these people united under Lord Nerevar's ring, known as Moon and Star. However, a conflict eventually formed between the great houses, where House Dagoth and the dwarves split off from everyone else. And as I mentioned before in the last update, the dwarves eventually disappeared in the middle of that war, but Nerevar eventually was mortally wounded in combat with Dagoth-Ur, which Dagoth-Garrus talked about when we talked to him. And then afterwards, the 3 gods managed to form the temple. So what's next? Alright, the Stranger. And this is a text that Nabani Mesa gave us a long time ago, and I just sort of skipped over it. And it's one of many prophecies that sort of describe when exactly Nerevarine is going to come and what sort of happens to him. And it says, when the earth, the sun, and the skies choke black, and sleepers serve the 7 curses, which is another text we're going to get to right after this one. Then some stranger is going to appear. And then a whole bunch of other stuff it describes. It's very consistent with all the other prophecies. And this last line here, many trials make manifest, the stranger's fate the curse's bane, many touchstones try the stranger, many fall but one remains. And that last line will be familiar to those of you who have seen the opening cutscene. It's shown at the very end of it. These two texts right here, the 7 curses and the 7 visions, were referenced in there. First up is the 7 visions, and what this says is that the Nerevarine is going to undergo 7 trials in order to really become a Nerevarine. The first trial is that on a certain date, on certain parents, incarnate moon and star are reborn, meaning we will be reincarnated. And our character does actually meet this criteria. We are born on a certain day, which means we have a birth sign, and we have uncertain parents. Yes, our character does in fact have those, just go with it, I guess. The second trial, neither blight nor age can harm him, the curse of flesh before him flies. This might be a reference to corpus disease. You'll remember that our character had corpus for roughly 2 months, yet didn't change into a strange zombie or some ugly walker or whatever that was. You'll also remember that the cure that Devaith Fear had, which killed everyone else, worked on us for some strange reason. Then there's the third trial, the cavern's dark as Ura's eyes sees and makes to shine the moon and star. We don't quite know what that means yet. The fourth trial is that we are supposed to go to the 3 great houses on Vvardenfell, and they will give us the title of Hort Tor. The fifth trial is we have to go to all of the Ashlander tribes, and they will all give us the title of Nerevarine. The sixth trial is somewhat cryptic, and we don't quite know what that means yet either. It says something about eating their sin and is reborn, and a whole bunch of other odd stuff. And lastly, the seventh trial. His mercy frees the cursed false gods, binds the broken, redeems the mad. One important thing about the distant priests is that they consider Vivek, Amalexi, and Sothasil to be false gods. And the Progress of Truth mentions that they consider that these gods might in fact derive the sources of their powers from the same way that Dagoth-Ur derived his. Our next text is the 7 curses, and this has been annotated by the distant priests, and they actually don't quite know what this means. The text itself is somewhat abstract, refers to a bunch of curses, and they don't quite know how to interpret them. Like it's the curse of fire, curse of ash, curse of flesh, curse of ghosts, curse of seed, curse of despair, and curse of dreams. And they say right there it's somewhat ambiguous. Might refer to the drummer, might refer to House Dagoth, or might refer to the treachery that happened at Red Mountain. The some priests in Progress of Truth talk about how the 3 gods betrayed Nerevar at Red Mountain, and that allowed him to be mortally wounded by Dagoth-Ur. And they have a whole bunch of other notes here that sort of talk about the same thing. This isn't actually a very important text plot-wise. You can still understand all of the plot without really reading it at all. Our next text is called Kragenak's Tools, and this talks about the disappearance of the dwarves. See, a lot of people believe the dwarves disappeared for mysterious reasons and nobody knows why. But by reading the Apocrypha, the distant priests seem to have figured out the exact reason why the dwarves disappeared, and this text goes into detail on that. Underneath Red Mountain, the gigantic volcano in the center of Vvardenfell, a bunch of Dwemer miners discovered a magical stone. And one of the Dwemer miners, Lord Kraganak, discovered that this magical stone was actually the heart of one of the Daedric gods, the god Lorkhan, cast there way back in the day as punishment because he created a more world, a whole bunch of other mythical stuff that doesn't really matter a ton. So what Kraganak hoped to do was to create several tools in order to try and control the power of the heart and do whatever he wanted with it. And so he forged those 3 great tools, Wraithguard, Asunder, and Keening, and he hoped to use them to do whatever he wanted with the heart. The problem was, when Kraganak used those tools on the heart during the Battle of Red Mountain, the dwarves completely disappeared. No one knows where they went, they just are completely gone. And because the dwarves completely disappeared, once Kraganak used the tools, the First Council was able to win the war against the Dwemer. So what happened was, Lord Nerevar and Dagoth-Ur retrieved the tools and didn't quite know what to do with them. So Nerevar left Dagoth-Ur alone with the tools and the heart of a god while he went to go consult with the 3 gods of the tribunal, which was a great idea that could not possibly go wrong at all. So, Lord Nerevar went to bring the three gods to Red Mountain so they could figure out what to do with it, but Dagoth-Ur was tempted by the power of the tools, and then Dagoth-Ur fought for them. Eventually, Lord Nerevar was able to kill Dagoth-Ur, but Nerevar was mortally wounded by him during the battle. Before dying, Lord Nerevar and all the counselors and the tribunal swore an oath to protect the power of the tools and to never ever use them, but the tribunal decided to use them anyway, and by using the power of the tools, they became gods. And that is how the distant priests consider Vivek, Amalexi, and Silthasil to be false gods, because they used the power of the heart to become gods. And so this text is basically telling us that the source of the power of the tribunal is in fact the same source as Dagoth-Ur's evil take over the world power. And what it says is a bit troubling, although we already know it. Dagoth-Ur isn't dead, no one knows what's going on with him, but he seems to be growing a lot stronger, and he seems to have become immortal through the power of the tools. For some odd reason, and this text says it is by the use of restraint, the tribunal didn't go crazy and become the evil villain of this game, but it's still the wrong power, it's still out of reach anyway. Now here's this very important sentence: Kragnek's tools are cursed, stealing power from the heart of a god's terrible following fate to disaster. And a whole bunch of other bad stuff is happening because of the heart of Lorkhan and Kragnek's tools. Now what's next? I actually looted a bunch of books from somewhere. I don't quite remember where I got them from. But I think that about covers all the major scrolls. If I skipped over something, you guys can probably look it up on your own. It's mostly redundant anyway. So next is this book, The Real Nerevar, and this goes into detail on who Nerevar was. Way back before Nerevar united the First Council, and united all the Dark Elves, he went in secret to a Dwemer smith and asked him to create a ring for him, which would give him the powers of persuasion. And Nerevar installed a little failsafe on the ring so that it would kill anyone else if they tried to wear it. And so Nerevar, through the use of this ring only he could wear, and his own powers of persuasion, he united the First Council. Eventually the First Council ended up splitting, and the whole Battle of Red Mountain happened, and all the rest of this stuff you guys have already just learned. Last is this book right here, Nerevar, Moon and Star, and I don't know much about this, but it just talks briefly about the Battle of Red Mountain and a bunch of other stuff we already know. I think that's everything. Oh, except the Lost Prophecy. And this is the text that Nabani Mesa really wanted, and it's again another basis for the 7 visions and the 7 curses. And like some of the other texts, the distant priests have annotated this one as well. What the first part of this text means is that we are going to be an Outlander, is that Nerevar is going to be an Outlander, which we are, in case you couldn't tell by all the hundreds of people calling us Outlander. And the rest of the text is described in those very long annotations there. All it talks about is the Outlander, also known as Nerevarine, is going to encounter the 7 curses and wield the thrice cursed blade, which might refer to Kragnek's tools since there are 3 of them. And last line talks about a place called the Unworn House. Distant priests don't quite know what exactly reaping the harvest of the Unworn House means. They think it might refer to House Dagoth, but it might also refer to House Dwemer or one of the other Lost Great Houses. And that pretty much wraps up all of the lore that the distant priests have given us. So all we have to do is take all this to Nabani Mesa, and we can continue on with the prophecies.